Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Practical Organic Living. In this episode, I'll be showing you another easy, practical way to roast coffee at home. In our previous videos, we shared a couple of reasons why you may want to consider roasting coffee at home, and we even showed you how to roast coffee at home using a Behmor roaster. However, in this episode, we wanted to show you another way how to roast coffee at home. And this way may be more applicable or relevant to those who perhaps live in colder climates because you can't roast coffee outside when it's cold and there's smoke that comes out the other machine. So this machine right here is called a Behmor roaster. And the beauty of this roaster is that there's smoke suppression technology. So you won't see smoke or fumes coming out of the roaster. Another great thing about this is that you have a lot more control over the roast itself. So if you are a more advanced roaster, you can actually customize the roast settings and roast profiles to something a little bit more configurable. But in today's video, what we're gonna focus on is how to get started using a Behmor roaster. So there's a couple of components to the roaster, and let me just open the roaster up and show you what's inside. So if I open this up here, you can see that there is a shaft collector and a drum roaster, and a brush. So let's take the shaft roaster out like this. And you can see that the purpose is to collect the shaft. The shaft is a coffee skin, and the coffee skin basically peels and falls somewhere. So you want this to collect the coffee skins. And this is the roaster itself. So the way it works is that it's basically a heating element in the back, and then the roaster will actually turn this drum. So this is pretty similar to the other coffee roaster that we demoed before. So before we start, I'm gonna take this out and show you how to actually open this. But before I do that, let me show you what's in the back. So you wanna make sure that the back is clean before you roast. So that's why they give you a brush, and you wanna use a vacuum cleaner and a brush to make sure that everything's clean, because there's sensors in here and there's particles that you don't want to turn into smoke, because that may affect the quality and taste of your roast. All right, so now let me show you how to use the drum. So this is the coffee drum itself. So as you can see, if you would turn it, it makes it so that there's even airflow that goes all along your coffee. And that's important because you want an even roast. You want parts of your coffee getting burnt. So this is a great design. So you want to put the coffee in the drum before you roast. So the way you do that is you want to open this. So there's actually a spring here, and then use two hands to open it like this. And that's how you would pour your coffee in here. So we're going to do that a little bit later. So the roaster actually provides you with an operation manual. You should read it before you actually roast it, but let me distill this manual down to a couple of things. So this is the control panel. And there's no way to turn this on actually. The way you turn on in automatic mode, which we're covering today, is by pressing 3 buttons. You want to select the number of grams or the weight of your coffees you're going to roast. The other button you'll want to know to press is the P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. This just correlates to the type of roasting profile that you want. The hardest part about this roaster probably is actually knowing which of these to select. So they actually provide you in the manual with suggested buttons to use for certain types of coffee. The last button you'd press to actually use this is the start button. So if you press these 3 buttons here, P1, you can see that the machine actually starts. So we're actually going to preheat this roaster before we start roasting coffee, but in the meantime, let me explain the coffee we're roasting today and tell you why we're going to select a particular roasting profile. So like I mentioned, you want to know which roasting profile to use. So you have to know the type of coffee beans that you're going to use. P1 is a roasting profile you want to use for a hard coffee bean. And P5 is going to be the profile you'll want to use for a soft coffee bean. So P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. Now, how do you know how hard your coffee bean is? Obviously, you can't crack it with a hammer and find how hard it is, but the easiest way to know how dense your coffee bean is going to be is by knowing the altitude where your coffee bean is grown. The reason is because the higher the altitude, the harder the bean is going to be, and most likely the smaller the bean is going to be as well. You want to roast these harder beans longer because it's just harder. So today I've got this particular variety that I'm going to roast, and I read that this grows about 2,000 meters above sea level, which equates to roughly 6,000 feet. So P1 is suggested for coffee beans that grow over 5,000 feet above sea level. So that's why we're going to use a P1 roasting profile. So now I'm going to measure 1/4 of a pound of coffee beans. And keep in mind that the coffee beans actually lose weight when you roast them. All right, there. Now we've got 4 ounces, which is 1/4 of a pound of coffee beans. And this is how much you would expect to roast for this particular setting. So before we can actually start roasting the coffee, we need to preheat the roaster. It's very similar to preheating an oven before you actually start baking something. So now that we've put the drum inside the roaster, we can start preheating. You want to do 1.5 minutes of actual roasting. So you would press 1/4 pound and then P1 and then start. It starts at 8.5 minutes and we'll wait for 7 minutes, take it out, and then I'm going to put my coffee inside and then put it back in. So now we're gonna start roasting the coffee. So 1/4 pound, P1, and then start. So while the coffee is roasting, let me explain to you how you know when your coffee is done. Depending on how dark you want your coffee to be, like a light, medium, dark roast, or city, city plus, full city, you'll want to listen for the first cracks. Once you hit the first crack, if you want a light roast, you can basically stop roasting right away. But if you want something a little bit darker, then you could roast till the second crack or slightly after the second crack. So what the roaster is going to do is roast this for no more than 8.5 minutes on this particular profile setting. And this roaster actually has a safety feature, so it doesn't allow me to walk away and do something and then come back. So once the roaster hits about 75% of its roasting time, it'll start beeping and you'll actually have to hit the start button. If you don't hit the start button, the roaster will automatically shut off because that's the safety feature of this roaster. So we'll let this roast to about 3 minutes and we'll hit the start button to continue roasting. So you've got to press the start button within 30 seconds or it will automatically shut off. So as you can see, the roaster will still continue the roast. And actually right now, I can hear the first crack. Okay, so once you hit the first crack, you can decide whether you want to complete the roast. So if you want to stop the roast right now, all you have to do is press the cool button. So I'm actually going to press the cool button now. And this will automatically take 12 minutes to fully cool down. So at this point in the roast, you've got 2 options. You can either open the door and let the roaster cool down faster, or you can let the roaster cool down for the 12 minutes. So what I'm going to do today is actually show you what it's like by opening the door. So now if I open the door, it'll cool down faster. As you can see, there's a lot of shaft blowing around. So you've got the shaft collector down here, and you have the drum in the back that's rotating. And what's going on right now is the roaster is actually just blowing a lot of air so that the temperature cools down. Now it's really important that you let the roaster finish the full 12 minutes of cooling because you don't want to damage the machine by letting the components overheat. So the reason why we're opening the door also is because we're going for a lighter roast, because for certain coffees, you want to taste floral notes. So if you roast the coffee a little bit more into a medium or darker roast, you will actually burn off those subtle floral aromas. So now the roaster has finished cooling down. So we're going to remove the shaft collection tray first. And as you can see, there's a lot of shaft. So when you open the door, you get a lot of shaft blowing out. So that's why you may want to consider not opening the door and let it cool inside. Next step is to take out the roaster drum. And let me pour some out for you guys to see how the coffee beans turn out. So as you can see, we roasted the coffee beans pretty lightly. And the roast is actually not as even as I'd like. So if I use a more manual mode and did some adjustments, you'd probably get a better roast. But this is actually pretty good for an automatic roaster. So you can see there's not a lot of shaft. Most of the shaft has been blown off. Here's some shaft here. But all in all, the roast looks pretty good. So we'll try this out shortly and we'll let you know how this tastes. So we're gonna pour the roasted coffee beans into our coffee can. Just be aware that some coffee beans get stuck in between. So you may need to use your hand or use something else to get the coffee beans out. So that was our video on how to roast coffee using a Behmor coffee roaster. We hope this video was helpful, and we hope that this video inspired you to try roasting coffee at home, because it took less than 10 minutes to roast 1/4 pound of coffee. In our next video, we'll actually be showing you a comparison between two different coffee roasters. This coffee roaster I showed you today and the Behmor Coffee roaster that we showed you a while back. So that's it for today's video, everyone. See you in the next video. Bye.